Hello everyone. Today I'm back with another chapter about the girl named Tu Sam. Please relax and listen to the story. After hearing Tu Sam's father lay out the entire truth, Lee immediately reopened the case with his colleagues. They reviewed every detail, re-examined every trace of evidence, and reconstructed the entire timeline of the incident. They checked surveillance cameras around the neighborhood, looked for witnesses, and collected statements from nearby residents. For hours on end, Lee barely left the investigation room. His eyes were tense from focusing too long, his hands constantly flipping through pages as if he could dig his way straight to the truth. Finally, based on the camera footage, they tracked down a young man who appeared right at the time Bitch's phone was reported stolen. He was brought in for questioning. From the first second he entered the interrogation room, he talked non-stop, denying everything. He was trembling but tried to act calm, saying he just happened to pass by. But the moment Lee laid out the evidence in front of him, the fingerprints on the phone, the video showing him meeting Bitch in a hidden alley, the street vendor's testimony saying she saw them exchanging something, each piece of evidence fell like a hammer. At first, the man still argued stubbornly, but after hours of questioning, he cracked. Sweat drenched his forehead, his breathing turned erratic, and he sank into the chair. He stayed silent for a long time before finally breaking down in despair and confessing everything. It was Bitch who hired him to stage the scene and fabricate the robbery to frame her own sister. He described every step, every detail, every instruction she gave him to ensure Tu Sam would be falsely accused. When the last word left the man's mouth, Lee stood there feeling his chest tighten, partly out of anger but even more out of sorrow for Tu Sam, that gentle girl who always endured everything quietly, only to be hurt by her own sister. In that moment he made up his mind. No matter how difficult it was, he had to get justice for her. Meanwhile, across the city, Bitch nearly lost her mind when she heard her accomplice had been arrested and was already confessing. She panicked so hard she dropped her glass, the water splashing across the floor without her even noticing. Her mother turned pale and grabbed Bitch's hand as if clinging to a lifeline. The two locked themselves inside a room, sitting close together, trembling as they tried to come up with a way out. But every idea they thought of led nowhere. They knew once the confession was submitted, the police would push the investigation to the end. And at that moment, Bitch's mother remembered someone, Mr. Hung, a man she once had a special connection with, who also happened to be Lee's superior. Without hesitation, she dragged Bitch up, forced her to dress neatly, put on makeup, and both hurried to his house. When the door opened, Mr. Hung looked at them with a mix of curiosity and amusement. Bitch's mother immediately played the role of a devastated woman, claiming her daughter had been framed, crying while begging for help. Then she subtly placed a thick envelope on the table and nudged it toward him. Mr. Hung glanced at it, the corner of his mouth curling ever so slightly. "Leave it. I'll take care of it," he said. And just like that, the mother and daughter walked out believing they had bought their safety. At the station, Lee was preparing the paperwork to detain Bitch when his phone rang. He looked at the screen. The caller made him freeze. His superior. The moment he answered, a cold, authoritative voice commanded, "Lee, stop investigating Tu Sam's case. Do not go any further." Lee stood still for a few seconds, then forced himself to respond. "Sir, the case is making major progress. We already have a confession." He didn't finish. His superior cut him off sharply. "When I say stop, you stop. The file will be reassigned. That's an order." The voice was icy, absolute, leaving no room for argument. Then the call ended abruptly, leaving Lee standing motionless. In that instant, he knew something corrupt had wormed its way into the case, and whoever interfered had enough power to silence anyone. Rage boiled inside him, not only because justice was being strangled, but because he knew the one suffering the most was Tu Sam. The image of her, small, fragile, quietly enduring, flashed in his mind. For the first time, Lee felt true helplessness. But along with it came a stronger resolve. Even if he was forbidden, he would not let her suffer another injustice. And deep down he understood. The reason he could not walk away was no longer just duty. It was because he cared for her far more than he allowed himself to admit. From the moment the order to stop the investigation was given, Lee felt as if his heart dropped into a void. He stood silently in his office, staring at the thick case file as if he himself were betraying to Sam. He had promised her, had looked into her tear-filled eyes, and told her he would personally clear her name. And now, when the truth was only one step away, he was forced to stop. A hand from the shadows had crushed justice right in front of him. He tried to reason with his superior again, only to be met with a threatening glare and a warning. If you want to keep your job, don't touch what's above your rank. When Lee walked out of the meeting room, his whole body felt rigid. His fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had never felt so powerless. But what hurt him most was seeing the criminal, the one who staged the fake robbery and framed to Sam, being released, smirking smugly as he walked past. Lee nearly lunged at him. His entire body trembled with fury. He knew he was being forced to go against his conscience. That night he could not sleep. Every tick of the clock stabbed at him, reminding him that he had failed the girl who believed in him. While Lee was tormented every minute, Bitch felt triumphant. She believed with Mr. Hung backing her, she would never be arrested. Thinking about her accomplice being released only made her bolder, more arrogant. She bragged openly that she had someone protecting her. She even dared to stroll past to Sam's house, flaunting her freedom, as if daring anyone to challenge her. But deep down a hidden fear gnawed at her. She knew to Sam might be gentle, but she wasn't stupid. One day she might tell Lee everything. One day Lee might reopen the case. One day no one would be able to save her again. That fear turned into paranoia. She refused to let to Sam have even the slightest chance to speak up. She refused to let anyone praise to Sam in front of Lee. She feared Lee would take to Sam's side. And from that fear, a new plan took shape inside her, colder, sharper, far more vicious than before. This time she would make no mistakes. She observed to Sam from afar, memorized her schedule, the days she worked late, the roads she walked alone. She sat with her mother for hours, crafting step-by-step plans, deciding whom she could bribe, whom she could use. Her eyes grew darker with hatred and jealousy. She didn't just want to Sam arrested. She wanted her destroyed, humiliated, unable to lift her head again. She wanted Lee to believe to Sam was the villain. She wanted to crush every hope to Sam had. So she prepared fake witnesses, bought off people willing to lie, and built a perfect trap where every clue would point to only one person, to Sam. Meanwhile, even though Lee had been ordered to stop, he couldn't shake the dread in his chest. Every time he remembered the frightened look on to Sam's face, he felt a stab of pain. He didn't know that while he was struggling between justice and authority, Bitch had already prepared a new trap. And it was slowly closing in, aimed directly at the girl he wanted to protect most. Bitch nurtured her new plan in her mind for many days. Every detail calculated with precision. This time she wanted everything to look like an unfortunate accident, an unexpected incident that no one could pin on her. She knew that if she did it right, everyone would think it was just bad luck, and she would walk away untouched. One afternoon, Bitch deliberately came to Sam's place with a face that looked apologetic, her voice sickeningly sweet and fake. Sam, being gentle by nature and not wanting to create more conflict, reluctantly agreed to walk with her for a bit to talk. They walked side by side along the small road leading from the boarding area to the main street, the late afternoon sunlight stretching into long golden streaks across the pavement. As they walked, Bitch discreetly observed their surroundings, her eyes sweeping quickly over each corner, each shadowed spot, each passing vehicle. She knew her accomplice was hiding nearby, waiting for the signal to ride in at the right moment. When she saw a familiar motorbike speeding toward them from a distance, her heart pounded wildly, but her face remained perfectly calm, showing not a single crack. Reaching a stretch of road with no cameras and few people around, she suddenly grabbed her ankle and cried out in pain, pretending to have twisted it. She bent down, holding her foot. Startled, Sam stopped and leaned down to help her, not even having time to ask what was wrong before Bitch's hand shoved her. A hard, cold, ruthless push done with full intention. Everything happened in a single fleeting second. Sam lost her balance, her whole body thrown off the sidewalk and onto the street, just as the motorbike rushed in at high speed. The screech of brakes tore through the air, followed by a brutal, bone-chilling impact. The small body of Sam was flung to the ground, her head hitting the road. Then she lay still, completely motionless. Blood slowly spread beneath her hair. People screamed. Footsteps pounded. The sound of sudden braking filled the chaos. Bystanders panicked and crowded around, but no one dared to reach out to help, afraid of getting involved, afraid of responsibility. Bitch pretended to panic, looking around before running away, forcing her face to look terrified while inside she felt a twisted satisfaction at seeing her plan succeed. Right as the crowd gathered, Officer Lee happened to be nearby, patrolling that stretch of road. He heard people shouting, "Accident! There's been an accident!" and immediately ran over. When he finally pushed through the ring of onlookers, the sight before him made him feel like his soul was ripped out of his body. The person lying unconscious, limp on the cold cement, her face smeared with dust, was none other than Sam. In that moment, the blood in Lee's veins seemed to freeze. His heart clenched as if someone were crushing it in their fist. All sounds around him faded, leaving only the thunderous pounding of his heartbeat in his ears. He rushed forward, dropped to his knees beside her, his hands trembling as he checked her faint breathing. Her face was deathly pale, her lips drained of color, and at the corner of her eyes, tiny specks of dust clung to lashes that didn't even flutter. Without thinking for even a second, Lee scooped her up into his arms. His arms wrapped tightly around her fragile body, as if he were afraid she would disappear if he dared loosen his grip. He ran while shouting loudly for people to move aside and clear the way. For the first time in his life, he felt fear take over every inch of his being. Fear of losing her. Fear they wouldn't save her in time. Fear that when she finally woke up, she would never again hear his voice. Lee carried Sam into the police vehicle, slammed the door so hard the glass rattled, started the engine and sped off faster than he'd ever driven before. The wind whipped against his face, but what burned his eyes wasn't the air. It was the despair and fury churning inside him. He didn't know who had done this, but deep down, Lee knew this was no ordinary accident. And the first person he thought of was Bitch. Lee drove to the hospital at a speed even he had never dared reach. Every second that passed on the road felt like a knife carving into his chest, because with each moment, Sam's breathing beside him grew weaker. She lay on the back seat, her head tilted to one side, her hair messy, tangled with dust and blood. Her face was so pale that Lee felt if he were even a minute late, she would slip away from this world. He kept glancing back at her through the rearview mirror, his voice hoarse and shaking. Sam, hang in there. Can you hear me? Don't keep your eyes closed like that. You have to wake up. But the only response was a terrifying silence. As soon as he reached the hospital gate, Lee jumped out before the car had fully stopped. He rushed to the back, pulled open the door, lifted her into his arms and sprinted straight into the emergency ward. The nurses gasped when they saw him carrying a girl covered in blood and rushed over to help. Traffic accident, unconscious, possible head trauma. Lee blurted out so fast his voice caught. The on-duty doctor immediately ordered a stretcher to be brought over. They gently transferred Sam from his arms onto the gurney. The moment they took her away, a cold emptiness and suffocating fear swept through him. His hands twitched as if they still wanted to hold on to her, but he had to let go and watch the medical team wheel her into the emergency room. The door swung shut, cutting off his view of her completely. Lee stood there, breathing hard, his hands braced on his knees, his heart pounding so violently it felt like it would burst. For the first time in his life, he was scared to the point his legs barely held him up. He paced back and forth in front of the emergency room, every minute of waiting stretching out like an hour. His mind replayed the image of Sam lying on the road, blood streaming from her temple, eyes tightly shut. Then he remembered his promise. I will clear your name. Yet here he was, instead of protecting her, he had let her fall into danger, hanging between life and death. A doctor came out and asked for someone to sign the consent form for emergency intervention. Lee grabbed the pen, his hand shaking so badly his signature ran crooked across the line, but he didn't care. As soon as the doctor went back inside, he leaned against the wall, tilted his head up toward the ceiling, trying to swallow the tightness clogging his throat. There was only one thought in his mind. If anything happens to Sam, he will never forgive anyone involved. Inside the emergency room, the red light flashed like a signal of the battle for her life. Lee stood outside, eyes locked on the door, as if willing someone to come out and tell him she would be okay. But the longer he waited, the tighter fear gripped his chest. He lowered his head, His fingers interlaced so hard the knuckles turned white. His lips murmuring words he barely registered himself. "To Sam, please don't leave me." Meanwhile, at the far end of the hallway, a few figures were secretly watching. One of them glanced over, then quickly slipped away. It was none other than Bitch's accomplice, the one who had caused the crash. He had come to see whether the plan had worked. When he saw Lee in panic, saw To Sam lying motionless, he smiled in satisfaction. What he didn't know was that very smile had been noticed by a hospital staff member, someone who would later become a crucial piece in uncovering the truth. Time felt frozen in the hospital corridor. Lee stood there for a very long time, his hand gripping his police ID so tightly the edges dug into his palm. Cold sweat trickled down his neck, his heart racing as he imagined the worst. He was terrified to even picture a world without her, the girl he hadn't yet had the chance to fully confess to, the girl he hadn't yet had time to make up to for all the pain she had endured. When the emergency room door suddenly swung open, Lee jolted, his entire body tensing. His eyes lit up with a desperate mix of fear and hope as he nearly rushed forward to ask the doctor. In that split second, it felt like even his breathing had stopped. The emergency room door swung open, white light spilling out, and the doctor stepped forward. His face drenched in sweat, surgical gloves still on. Lee rushed toward him immediately, nearly grabbing the doctor's arm. His eyes bloodshot, breath ragged with extreme worry. His whole body was wound so tight it seemed like one single bad word would be enough to make him collapse. But the doctor gave a small nod, his voice calm though exhausted. "She is temporarily out of critical danger." In that instant, Lee's knees nearly buckled. He froze for a second, then quickly lifted a hand to cover his face, trying to hold back the flood of emotions rising inside him. The long breath he had been holding finally escaped his lungs. The doctor continued, voice low but reassuring. "She suffered a head injury. The impact was strong. There was slight bleeding, but we treated it in time. Her arm has multiple abrasions but no fractures, only bruising from the fall. However, she's still unconscious. We can't say when she'll wake up. But at the very least, her life is no longer in danger." "Thank you, doctor. Thank you, truly thank you." Lee spoke as if out of breath, his voice trembling so much it almost broke. The doctor placed a comforting hand on his shoulder before returning inside. Lee remained standing in the cold hallway, his heart pounding violently, relief, joy, lingering fear, and a deep ache from the thought of almost losing her forever. When he was finally allowed into the recovery room, Lee stepped inside slowly. The room was stark white, cool with the air conditioner, but to him it felt almost sacred. On the bed, To Sam lay still, her small face pale, her wound still fresh. One side of her temple was bandaged, her breathing weak but steady. Seeing her like that made Lee's heart twist painfully. He sat beside her, his hand trembling slightly as he reached out and gently held her cold fingers. He squeezed lightly, afraid he might hurt her. Each of her fingers was soft and cold enough to make a chill cut straight through his bones. "To Sam," Lee whispered, his voice tight, almost strangled. "Can you hear me? You're safe now, you're past the danger. Don't be afraid anymore." He lowered his head, resting his forehead against the back of her hand, his breath warming her cold skin. He had never been this afraid of losing someone. He had never felt so powerless. He stayed there for a long time, not knowing how much time passed. Everything around him blurred, leaving only the slow beeping of the heart monitor. Each beep a miracle, proof she was still alive. He didn't take his eyes off her face. Every delicate feature he once only dared to glance at secretly now laid before him in such fragile stillness it made his chest ache. Lee tightened his hold on her hand just a little. "I'm sorry for not protecting you. I'm sorry for breaking my promise." His voice cracked, heavy with remorse. "But from now on, I won't let anyone touch you again. Not even a strand of your hair." It sounded like a vow carved straight into his bones. A nurse passing by paused, glancing inside. She saw Lee sitting there, the man everyone called unshakable, the hardened steel officer, now reduced to a worried, helpless figure beside a girl lying unconscious. He held her hand through the night, never once closing his eyes, terrified that even a moment of carelessness would cause her to slip away. The dim hospital light fell across his face, revealing his pain, guilt, and the love he had never dared to speak. Somewhere else, in the comfort of her familiar darkened room, Bitch was laughing, unaware that Sam had survived, unaware that at this very moment, her perfect plan was beginning to crack, and unaware that inside Lee, a slow-burning fury was igniting, ready to erupt the moment Sam opened her eyes. Hours passed. Lee watched every weak but steady breath of hers and came to one certainty. This was not an accident. Could not have been. Sam was cautious by nature, always walking close to the sidewalk. How could she be hit hard enough to suffer a head injury? And why did it just so happen that Bitch was with her at that very moment? Lee had no official evidence, but his instincts as an investigator, and his fear of losing the woman he cared for, screamed one truth. Someone orchestrated this. And that someone was none other than Bitch. That night, at nearly 3 in the morning, the hospital hallway was so quiet he could hear every footstep. Lee stood, gently pulled the blanket up to make sure she wasn't cold, then held her hand one last time before whispering, "I will find the truth. I promise you." He stepped out of the room silently. Even the click of the door was barely audible. Outside, the night wind hit his face, snapping him into full clarity. His eyes changed, no longer soft with fear, but razor-sharp with determination. He opened his phone and deleted every message related to his superior's order to stop the case, preventing any trace from being used against him. Then he began his own investigation. His first move was returning to the accident site. The street was empty. The yellow streetlight illuminated a long skid mark, evidence that the rider wasn't startled, but had already been speeding before braking. Lee crouched down, picking up a small shard of black plastic, a fragment from the motorcycle. He slipped it into his pocket, treating it like forbidden evidence that must be protected. He retraced the scene based on witness accounts. "I only heard shouting. When I came out, the girl was already on the ground, and the rider had fled." Too simple. Far too simple. A real accident always had prior observation from someone nearby. But here, no one saw the moment of impact. Another sign of staging. He walked the road again, analyzing every blind spot. No cameras. Few pedestrians. Near dusk. Everything too perfectly aligned. And whoever did this knew the road, the timing, and even Sam's habits. Lee paused, thinking of one person. The accomplice Bitch once hired to frame Sam. A reckless rider, known for driving at high speed. Exactly the kind of person someone would hire to make a hit look accidental. He opened a private encrypted archive on his phone, a storage hidden from official systems. He zoomed in on the man's face and suddenly remembered the shadowy figure he'd seen earlier in the hospital hallway. The silhouette matched. The limp in his step matched. The old jacket he always wore matched. Lee inhaled sharply, fury rising like fire. If it was him, then the crash was intentional. And if he was at the hospital afterwards, he came to confirm the outcome, something only a guilty man would do. Lee headed straight to the hospital's security room, calling in a favor from an old acquaintance in the medical security team. They pulled up the hallway footage. When they rewound the video, it was exactly as Lee expected. The accomplice stood in the shadows, peering toward the emergency room before slipping away. It was him. No mistaking it. Lee clenched his fists so hard the veins bulged. He knew if he submitted this footage, his superior would bury it like last time, or worse, silence the person who brought it forward. But he no longer cared. From the moment he saw Sam lying unconscious on the road, fear had turned into resolve. He was no longer just a police officer restricted by orders. He was a man determined to protect one person at any cost. Lee slid the USB with the footage into his coat, turned away from the hospital, his eyes darkening. No matter who's backing you, no one will save you now. Laying a hand on Sam means crossing my line. That night, for the first time, Lee felt no hesitation. He was ready to go against his superior, against whatever force stood behind Bitch, against anyone who dared threaten the girl lying in that recovery room.
Hello mọi người, lại là mình đây. Rất vui được gặp lại mọi người trong video của mình. Chúc mọi người có những trải nghiệm đầy thú vị ở trong kênh của mình nha. Hy vọng rằng những video của mình sẽ mang đến niềm vui cho mọi người. Hiện tại thì kênh của mình đang phát hành vào khung giờ 7 giờ tối. Và câu chuyện mình mang đến cho mọi người đó là câu chuyện của cô gái nghèo mang tên Tự Sam. Mình rất hy vọng là mọi người sẽ yêu thích câu chuyện của mình. Và nếu có ý kiến hay đóng góp gì thì nhớ để lại dưới phần bình luận để mình cải thiện video sau hay và hấp dẫn hơn. Cảm ơn mọi người đã luôn ủng hộ mình trong suốt thời gian vừa qua. Mình rất hy vọng là được đồng hành cùng mọi người trong thời gian sắp tới để mình có nhiều động lực hơn, đưa đến nhiều câu chuyện hay hơn cho mọi người xem. Cảm ơn mọi người đã xem hết video hôm nay. Xin chào và hẹn gặp lại mọi người ở video lần sau của mình nhé.